So we have a lot of questions tonight, so we'll try to answer them. And what we've done is they were sort of random questions, so we've grouped them into subjects, and we'll read those questions on that particular subject and then talk about it. So the first two questions are about Swami Kriyananda. And it says, could you please share one of your previous last experiences with Swami Kriyanandaji near the end of his life? And also, what one quality or behavior of Kriyanandaji that most inspired you both?
I'm sorry, it was a typo. It's supposed to be precious, not previous. Precious.
Oh, precious. Okay. Well, I'm going to still go with previous last. Typo or not, since it is a precious memory. We were with Swami the last time we saw him in the physical body. We were with him at the retreat area, the ashram near Pune, the Watunde property. And we had spent some days there with him, and then we were leaving the next day to go back to America. And we had been having tea with Swami, and he was walking slowly in those days. So the three of us walked together, and Swamiji, I think he knew about his imminent passing, but he didn't want to indicate that to anyone. Really, nobody knew right up until the moment of his passing that he was going to pass, although many of us had the sense that, but he didn't tell us. At any rate, in this walk, he wanted to be sure that he gave us some last instructions about Ananda, because we were the people in charge of taking over after he left. And one would think with a big worldwide work that he would talk about how to operate the organization, how to have things run smoothly, what to do with that center and that center. None of that. He didn't talk about anything about organization at all. He talked about people. He said, please be sure that this person is taken care of. And he said, try the best you can to have harmony with YSS, SRF. So it was all about deeper qualities and personal things, and not about organization at all. And it was a very, very touching last remembrance of him. We had heard that he was quite ill in the week before he passed and was becoming withdrawn. And we called him, and we were in America. He was in Assisi at the time. We called him and talked with him briefly and said, Swamiji, should we come over? Would you like us to come over and be there with you? And he said, no, don't come over. I just need to rest now. And he was getting ready for the long rest, not just the short one.
So my memory that I would like to share, precious, it actually took place. It wasn't the last time we were with him, but it was one of the last periods of time. He was in America and residing in the home that he had there. And our home in America is just a few minutes walk from Swami's house. And he would always call us every day when he was in residence in America. At 5 o'clock, we would always be home because the phone would ring and it would be Swami, as though it were the very first time. And he'd say, would you like to come over for tea? And we would always say, oh, thank you, that would be lovely. Same thing every single day. And then we'd go down. But the memory that I have isn't anything he said, but in those last months or weeks, probably more accurate, when his hearing wasn't good, so he couldn't necessarily hear when we would come in the room, but he would be sitting in his reclining chair, and we'd walk in quietly, and he would just be in bliss. He was just absolutely, there's no other way to describe it. His eyes were closed, blissful smile on his face. And what I drew from that was, this is the fruit of a life given to God. There was nothing he held back, nothing he kept for himself. It was just a constant act of service and devotion to his guru, to our guru. And it was like he was showing us, this is the goal of life, at the end, and you could see there weren't any regrets, there weren't any worries, total peace and bliss. And then we would stay there for a little while, and I think he sensed our presence, but I think he also wanted to give us that darshan. And so then after a while, he'd open his eyes and just, totally come back to, oh, how are you? Do you want some tea? We'll have Leela, that was his housekeeper. She'll make us some tea, and then we'd have tea. And then he would go for a walk around the garden outside his house. And it became increasingly difficult for him to walk. And he would put it off. So we'd have our tea. We'd say, oh, Swami, shall we go for a walk? Let me have a drink.
And he would try to delay it as much as possible.
Yeah, he would say, oh, I'll just have one more sip of tea. Oh, maybe Leela can make, put a little more tea. And then finally.
Jokingly.
Yeah.
He knew he needed to take his exercise.
And then finally he would say, all right, we have to go. But it was hard for him to go very far. But really the memory that sticks most in my mind is just that image of him in his reclining chair as we would come in, just in absolute bliss and peace. And I knew he was saying, that's the fruit of a life lived for God, and that this state should be the goal for all of you.
And the one quality that is
Here,
most...
we can each move.
Okay.
Having to move.
Okay. The one quality that's most precious that he demonstrated was absolute discipleship and a lifelong practice of deep, deep attunement of his consciousness with Master. And toward the last years of his life, he would sometimes say, I can no longer tell where Kriyananda ends and Yogananda begins. His consciousness had merged into that. He felt himself to be just an expression of Master's consciousness.
And I think, what Jyotish said is certainly, I think for me, also the most important quality. But then I would add also, just as we were saying, his deep compassion and desire to help everyone who he could, from just a stranger on the street who would look sad. It was like there wasn't any barrier between him and other people. And it could be someone he'd known for 50 years, someone he just hadn't even met, just walking down the street. But his heart was just so open with compassion and empathy and the desire to do whatever he could. Once he was in the hospital, he had, I think this was the heart surgery. He had many surgeries, but I think this was after the heart surgery. And his room was filled with flowers, as you can imagine, from all over. There was hardly a surface that wasn't overflowing with flowers. And then he said, there are people in this hospital who probably don't have many friends and don't have flowers in their room. And there were several of us in the room with Swamiji. he said, why don't you each take a bunch of bouquets and go through all the hospital, all the floors, and if ever you see a room, look in, if the door is open, and if there's no flowers, go in and bring these flowers, but not just leave them, because if they have no flowers, it probably means they're not getting many visitors either. So go in and just sit and bring the flowers and sit and talk with the people. So we did this for a few hours, really, and afterwards the staff of the hospital said, what a blessing it is to have Swami Kriyananda and the Ananda devotees in this hospital. So the deep love for God and expressed through his deep, deep compassion for everyone.
Really, as the consciousness expands, you take on all the positive qualities of God. And wherever it's appropriate, you just simply express those. It's not mental, it's not something that you have to try to remember to do, but it just is, God uses you as a channel. And Swamiji, because his consciousness was so uplifted and so in tune with Master, he just acted in the highest way appropriate to every situation. It was very beautiful to see. Okay, we have 6 questions having to do with mind and emotions. So I'll read those and then we'll talk on that subject. First question, how can we control our worries for our loved ones and still do what is required? For the last 2 years, I've struggled with my relative's health and helped her with treatments. Now again, she is having complications. I'm constantly worried in whatever I'm doing. How can I control this worry and continue my path in Kriya? The next question is, how can we practice calmness and centeredness in the midst of activity, because all activity seems to bring up some restlessness? And how can I discern whether a thought is true intuition? That is, how can I know whether I am hearing the intuitive voice of my soul or if it is the voice of my ego? And how can we cope when others are jealous of us? How do we cope when our friends get detached and leave us? And what does it mean to gain control over the inner energies? How do we notice it at a deeper level? And finally, what is one way to overcome restless thoughts when we meditate? So, all of these have to do with essentially the subject of how do we control our thoughts and our emotions when the pressures of the world are at us, whether it's illness of health or of a relative, whether it is being in a job or an atmosphere where there's restlessness and conflicting emotions and so on. It's a long, slow process. Remember, the Gita and the scriptures tell us that we have been in these bodies for a very, very long time, not just this body, but we have reincarnated again and again, perhaps thousands of times. In fact, one time we were with Swamiji, and we happened to be in Darjeeling, and we were driving a car because we were going to go, there was a Tibetan Buddhist community there, and they did weaving, and so we were driving out because Swamiji wanted to go out and purchase some rugs, but what he really wanted to do was go and help support this group that had been displaced from their home. But we were driving, and we passed a teacher with a group of students that were on their way to class. And there was one line with girls and one line with boys, and they were all wearing the same kind of uniforms, kind of a light blue, and they had scarf around their neck, and they were all bright, and they were singing something as they were walking along to school, all together. And it was just a very nice, uplifting scene. And then 2 minutes later, we were passing through a part of town where we saw a lot of children sitting on the side, because it was a very poor part of town, the side of the road with hardly any clothes and very few possessions, just playing with some little thing in the soil. And it just struck me what a contrast there is, how some people are born into a life with the karma to have a good education and loving parents and some resources, and others are born with nothing. And I began thinking about how many lives it takes. And then I remembered from the autobiography of a yogi that Master said that it takes 1 million years of harmonious, disease-free living for the soul to evolve. And so with my little mathematical mind, I began calculating, and I came up with the thought that it might take 60,000 lifetimes to achieve liberation. So I mentioned that to Swami, and he said, "Where did you get that tiny figure?" And so I explained my very clear and precise scientific technique for arriving at that. And he said, "Well, you didn't pay attention." He said, "Disease-free, harmonious living. How many lifetimes do you know that are disease-free and harmonious?" And so he was telling me that it takes a very, very long time for the soul to evolve from the beginning up to enlightenment. So all of the experiences that we have in life, the restlessness, the challenges, the work environment, the difficulty with relatives, all those experiences come to us as part of the soul's process of evolution. And it's not at all random. We will draw to ourselves exactly those experiences that we need for the development of some soul quality or the freedom that we have. So if we need to have the experience of being in a restless, conflicting, disharmonious environment, then we will draw that. And what does that do for the soul? It's not that we're going to fix that environment. Somehow we're going to get the magic mantra and everybody will become calm and happy and uplifted around us. Rather, it will begin to produce in us on deeper and deeper and deeper levels the intense desire for harmony, the intense desire to be in a sattvic environment, so it awakens in us that soul hunger, and that soul hunger can never be accomplished. It can never be satisfied by anything in the world, because it's the nature of the world to be in conflict. That's always Dvaita, and there's always duality. So that hunger for true harmony and true sattvic elements can't be satisfied in the world. And so it impels the soul to begin to look for first an environment, but a teaching that will raise the mind up. And so that's why we're all here tonight, is we have a soul hunger for being with other people who are kind and loving and sattvic and seeking God and seeking God union. And if we haven't had that soul desire quite strongly enough impressed on us, then we will both be in a situation like this, maybe at night, and during the day in a very disharmonious situation, so that we can experience. It isn't enough to read about these things. We have to really experience it so we can experience the difference between what happens in what kind of a world or an environment is created when the driving force is economic or material. And in that, there's always going to be a conflict of egos and a conflict of agendas and some disharmony, perhaps dishonesty, and so on. And what kind of an environment is naturally produced when people are seeking God? And we live through those experiences, and it drives the soul to say, I choose seeking God. And as we do that, then gradually, however much of that experience of disharmony we need to drive that point home, because it's not just the conscious mind, it's the subconscious. And remember, all of those past thousands and hundreds of thousands of lives, we've had just as rich and complicated of an experience in each of those lives as we have in this life. And so a lot of experiences and a lot of tangled emotions and so on. It takes a long time to clear that out. That's the process of meditation, process of Kriya. Kriya actually burns up those vrittis, those seeds of that in the spine. Gradually, over time, we become more and more I love the word Patanjali used. It's not like we hate that, not like we do reject it, but Patanjali used the word disinclined. We become disinclined to want to be in that kind of an environment. And gradually then, once we've learned whatever lesson we need to learn, then God puts us in an environment that is just right for us to learn the next set of lessons. But so that conflict is not only necessary, but drawn to us by our own ultimate desire for freedom. And so we just need to try to work with that as well as we can. And the fact that our minds get drawn in and engaged in that process, engaged in the conflict or engaged in the desire to move ahead and to win or whatever, even into things like, some corruption or something we might get drawn into. Eventually, we will end up rejecting all of that in a deep way, and because we will see and experience that not only doesn't make us happy, it makes us actively unhappy. And so, but we have to experience that on more than just a mental level.
I saw a couple of faces sitting here when Jyotish was saying 60,000 lives is a small number. A couple of your jaws dropped. So I want to reassure you that Master said, by the time you seriously pick up the search for God, and that means moving towards discipleship of a Satguru, receiving Kriya Yoga, he said if all the incarnations, the hundreds of thousands, are like a 24-hour clock, by the time you reach the point where you sincerely take discipleship and begin practicing Kriya, just the last few little ticks of the second hand, that's all that's left. So you don't have 60,000 plus ahead of you. Not ahead of you. We have all had them behind us. But now it's important to remember that we're, just as Swami was showing us, what does the end of the journey look like? What does the end of karma look like? It's more and more inner freedom. It's the ability to deal with ill health ourselves or relatives with ill health and to retain the centeredness and peace of mind. Last week, some of you may have seen, we gave a little sharing in Bangalore on finding inner peace in a stressful world. And we read a quote from Master, I'll paraphrase, in which he said, "Tests and challenges are the abrasive surface on which we hone and strengthen our unshakable inner peace." Unshakable inner peace. And so every test that comes, we're like a sculptor who's polishing a beautiful statue. At first it's rough, and the light can't be reflected off of it. But with every test, if we, with determination, with strength and faith in God, if we keep saying, I will not let anything interfere with my sense of inner peace, that becomes stronger and stronger. So all of the challenges to our peace of mind, to our sense of inner joy, these are all given, not to take them away from us. That's the important thing to remember, but to strengthen our ability. As Master said, the yogi should stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. And so all these tests that come to us, they're the abrasive surface that we hone our inner strength and our inner peace. So it's really, if you can look at everything that comes that way, you see everything is a wonderful spiritual opportunity. Is it easy? Not at all. We have a close friend. We met him while he was...
No, I'm going to sit down.
Okay. We met him while he was in prison already. He's 59 years old, and he's been in prison for 34 years for a crime he didn't commit. And while in prison, he found autobiography of a yogi and began reading it, and then somehow was able to contact Ananda, and many of our acharyas would go and visit him, and Jyotish gave him Kriya in a little closet. That was the only private space they had, but a closet in this prison. He's a beautiful soul. And he had one final, he has, I won't put it final because God can do anything, but the governor of the state of California was paroling life, he has a life sentence without parole, was paroling prisoners. And this governor will be out of office, his term will be over in November. And so this is the last chance, I think, for our friend. We gave him the name, he wanted a spiritual name, so we gave him the name Jai Ram, victory to God's victory, victory to God. And he may not get out now. He went into prison when he was 19. And if you have time in your prayers, think of a good man in California. His name is Jai Ram. And just pray. Not necessarily that he find freedom outwardly, but that he can use the tests that he finds in his life to grow closer to God. I think our feeling is he was a yogi in past lives, because his sister told us when he was a little boy and they would go swimming in a swimming pool, he would cross his legs and sit underwater for a long time. And he said, oh, come, sit underwater and close your legs. It's so much, cross your legs. It's so much fun. And she said, I can't sit underwater, but I think he was a yogi in past lives, and maybe he got powers and he misused them. Now he has no power whatsoever. So it's all balances out. So whatever challenges you have in your life, you know, you don't have to look very far to see someone who has greater challenges, and try to find the inner strength and peace to, no matter what happens, to say, God, nothing will take away my desire to feel your peace and your joy every moment, and fight for that. Fight for it, because the world will try to wrench it away from you. But if you fight for it, there'll come a time where the battle is done, like Swamiji, and you can just be floating in peace. And I'll just touch on one other little question about intuition. Just to answer briefly, how do you know the difference between ideas that are just mind-born and things that are intuitive perceptions, which means superconscious? Well, things of the mind, it's sort of like putting together pieces of a puzzle. We'll try this and we'll try that. The rational mind, that's how it works. It's sequential and logical. And it's useful, the rational mind. But then there's the superconscious mind, and that transcends the conscious rational process, where you just get a stroke of insight. And they said that Master Yoganandaji could talk with experts in any field, medicine or science or whatever it would be, and he would talk as their equal, because he intuitively could tune in to their field of expertise. He couldn't do that with the rational mind. So the intuitive perception, there's usually a great sense of calmness, of clarity. One might even say it seems self-evident, whereas the rational mind, there's always a little unsureness and always a little sense of doubt. You're not quite sure this is right. But with the intuitive perception, there's a clarity, yes, this is right. And so the more you call for that intuitive guidance, the more you become aware of it. Just like anything we do, the more we do it, the better we get at it. And so the more we try to live from an intuitive perception, the more we can identify when something really is intuitive guidance, intuition, or as opposed to just rational. Okay.
I'll address one more aspect of it, which is that, yeah, I think let's sit down. That's more friendly somehow. So there's one more aspect of this question that I would like to address, and it's basically, what do we do when the mind gets away from us, or the emotions get away from us, or we can't recollect that we're supposed to be doing our practice? Well, one thing is to try to build into your daily life some habits that because the problem with forgetting to do our practices is that it's self-defeating the problem is right in the forgetting. Could say, well, do your practices, but you've forgotten to do your practices. And if you could remember, then you wouldn't have forgotten.
Say that story about the demon got into the powder.
Oh, Devi said there's a story that Master used to tell. And so this man finds out that if he can do this Vedic ritual, he'll be able to have power over his mind and circumstances. And so he is supposed to do a sacrificial fire and then take some mustard seeds and throw them into the fire. And would cast out all the demons that are bothering him. And so he does that. And the demon appears and just laughs at him. And he says, I got into the seeds before you even cast them into the fire. Meaning that the problem in the mind is that the demons that we face are already in the mind. And so we can't cast them out by just outward things. So forgetfulness is a problem because we lose the ability to even remember to do our practices, at least at that moment. So one way around that is habit. And so build into your daily life certain habits which are beneficial to you. So, it can be very many different things. Remember in the autobiography, said that his guru, Ramakrishna, told him to stop every time he saw a body of water. Stop and meditate briefly and tune in to the Divine Mother. So some people always stop when they see a picture of Master, or they always train themselves to do something that stops the distraction and brings them back to center.
A friend of ours said that whenever he got into a car, which, we get into cars frequently, as he was putting his hand on the handle of the car, he always stopped, thought about Gurudev. And he said just those little points of remembering throughout the day that changes your perception.
And then once you recollect that you're supposed to bring your mind back or your emotions back under control, then there are a number of things that we can do. And in fact, we talked about this at the seminar that we did on Sunday, and you can watch or listen to that. Also, my blog for next week, which will be not this Friday, but the week after. So is on this. But in that, I mentioned 5 things that can bring the mind back under control, but I put them as ways to combat stress. And so the first one is pranayama, or breathing. So if you're in a stressful situation, or your mind is distracted, or your emotions have gotten away from you, there's a confrontation, just breathe deeply, because the breath and the mind are linked. And so if you breathe deeply a few times, or even better, do regular breathing, which is inhale to a count of 8, hold 8, exhale 8, or whatever is comfortable. Do that for just a little while, and it will bring your emotions, it will calm your emotions and bring your mind back. So that's one thing that you can do, but I won't go into them all because we've got other questions. I'll let you read the blog in 8 days.
Give you a preview.
Okay, so these next ones are on meditation. Is a healing prayer request to Divine Mother more powerful while we're fasting? I'll just answer that quickly and before going on to the other ones, because it's a little bit of a different one. Fasting can produce clarity of mind, and any prayer is more powerful when it is focused and sent in a powerful way to Divine Mother. So a prayer when you're calm is more powerful than a prayer when you're agitated. A prayer when your mind is focused is better than a prayer when you're distracted, and so on. So fasting can help, but don't think that you need to fast in order to pray.
No, I remember when my father was in the last days of his life, and I had gone back to be with the family, and I was able to speak with Swamiji, and I said, is there any special technique I should do, or prayer, or fasting? He said, no. He said, your love for him is the most powerful thing that can help him now. So don't think that techniques can substitute for the sincere desire to help someone.
There are 2 more related on what is the best way to end our meditations so we get inspired or look forward to the next one, and what is one way we can deepen and improve our devotion and sincerity to God. Best way to end your meditation, in my estimation, is twofold. One is to actively try to experience joy for 5 minutes or so. toward the end of your meditation, because joy is the highest vibrational level that we can bring our mind and emotions into. And so try to experience joy, actually feel joyful in those last few minutes of meditation, and then send that joyful, loving energy out to others in the world. And that builds a bridge between your own interior experience and being active in the world.
I'll add that it's actually a very important question, because if you let your meditation kind of, when you end it, kind of fall off the table, so to speak, okay, time's up, get up and go, it kind of nullifies the effectiveness of the meditation. So consciously begin your meditation with prayer, chanting, looking at Master or the other gurus, but consciously end it too. Just as Jyotish said, practice joy, or I often try to just say, Lord, I think about what the day ahead lies, and I picture Master being with me throughout that day. So now it's a continuity. I bring you into my meditation, and then be with me as I go to work, ride on the bus, drive there, have the meeting, whatever it is, but you kind of pre-program the day so that God is with you throughout that day.
And to improve devotion and sincerity, there's no quick and easy answer. The heart and the mind, our minds and emotions are wave-like, and they'll be up and then they'll be down and up and down, and gradually the amplitude of that up and down changes. So when you're feeling devotion, try to feel it as deeply as possible, and then when you're not, try to remember your actual experience of feeling it. And because when you're not feeling it, it sometimes feels insincere to fake the fact that you're feeling devotion. But honestly, even faking devotion is better than nothing. And but it's helpful to try to remember those times when you yourself have had the deeper experiences. That's more personal to you than reading about devotion.
And remember, Master said our path is one of meditation and service. And service can really help us. I watch all of you here at the center. I mean, we've only been here a few days, but over the years as we've come, so much service goes on. Beautiful altar, cleaning the rooms, preparing the feast, cleaning up, all the things that you do for the promotion, for the release of the answer. And it's a very, sometimes in meditation our minds can be, in our hearts, we can wander off. But when you're serving, it's in a way easier to offer your devotion, offer your sincerity. I'm not doing this for any personal gain. I'm not cleaning the temple because I'm going to get anything, but just simply because I love you. And that love is sincere. So service, not just meditation, but in service too, we can deepen our devotion and sincerity.
There's one here about when you're ill and in pain and can't meditate deeply, what to do then. Sometimes it's not the best thing to try to withdraw the mind in meditation. That's why in Kriya it said not to practice Kriya when you're ill or when when your stomach is full. And so because the body needs the prana for the physical processes. And so it may be that there are times when meditation is not necessarily the best thing to do, but there's never a time when devotion and self-offering aren't appropriate. And illness especially gives you that opportunity for deeper and deeper offering of everything, even the pain, even the weakness, even whatever is pulling your energy down. Offer that to Divine Mother and try to be grateful for the experience, because that experience is being brought to you by the combination of Divine Mother, the Guru, and your own soul, bringing that experience for your ultimate freedom.
Did we do all of those?
No? I'm going to let you do the next. 19 and 20.
Oh. Okay, why don't you do that one?
She's laughing. What is Nirvikalpa Samadhi? What is our state of mind? Is it possible to function in the normal world? Once you get into that state, is it forever, or do you get out of it sometime? Let me start with a disclaimer. I've never experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I've read about it. I've heard about it. But
You've probably seen Swami in Nirvikalpa.
so Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the highest state of Samadhi. There are two states. One is Sabhikalpa and then Nirvikalpa. Sabhikalpa comes in very deep meditation when the life force withdraws completely from the body and exits the body, and your consciousness exits the body and expands everywhere. And so you experience the state of Samadhi, which is not just the mental feeling, but the actual experience of you being everything and everyone and everywhere. And so there's no limitation, because behind our separateness is the fact that everything is God's consciousness. And so when you touch in truly, exit, the life force leaves this body and you touch in to the consciousness of Divine Mother in creation, then you experience yourself as all creation, because you're experiencing that. But then, when the life force comes back into the body, you lose that experience and you come back into separation and the sense of an ego. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the next state, and you never lose it. Even though you come back into the body, even though you re-experience the life force here, still you keep that expanded state of consciousness. Can you function? Well, Master was in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I think he functioned pretty well. And so, yes, you can. But in many cases, God just plays through every saint the way that is appropriate. So one saint might not have anything to do with the world, just live up in the Himalayas, and another saint at the same level of consciousness might be extremely active in the world, the way Master was. So at that state, there's no ego left. And so just whatever the will of God, you're doing that. Anandamoy Ma called it kind of Keyal, Keyhal, Keyal. And it meant kind of the divine whim. She just did whatever she was impelled to do by the consciousness of God. She didn't have any personal sense of it. So yes, you can function. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, do you ever get out of it? No, it's permanent. And so, because you never come back into ego consciousness.
I want to, maybe I'm wrong, whoever submitted this question, could be someone online, but do you get out after some time? I sense a little anxiety there. Do you get stuck in Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Really remember, no spiritual experience, whether it's seeing the spiritual eye or going breathless or higher states, nothing will ever happen to you without your full willing participation. So it isn't like something gets thrust on you, and how do I get out of here? It's like, it's just, like when you're a little child and you learn how to walk, and then all of a sudden you have that ability. Similarly, when we learn to meditate and go deeper, it's a faculty that we develop, and with our own willing participation. Okay, we'll do 2 last questions about meditation, and I think that's it then, isn't it? Yeah.
There's some on karma, but we've
covered it.
Well, we'll look and see.
Okay, so this one we didn't get to. What is one way to overcome restless thoughts when we meditate? Well, there are many, many ways, but I'll give you one. And if you recall, if those of you who have read Swamiji's autobiography, The New Path, he said when he was a young man in Master's ashram, he was trying so hard, it meant so much to him to be on the spiritual path and to be in Master's ashram. And he was trying so hard to meditate. And he said to Master, am I not trying hard enough? I don't feel like I can focus my mind. And Master said, you're trying too hard. It's making tension. And so the advice I would give you about calming restless thoughts is really try to relax in meditation. Meditation should be a very restful, enjoyable experience for you. Not, oh, I've got to do this, and oh, my mind's wandering, and I have to bring it back. But the more you can just remember, Master said, and this puzzled me for such a long time, superconsciousness is like that horizon line of the ocean and the sky, the horizon line between subconsciousness and the conscious mind. Superconsciousness is at that horizon. And so try to relax the conscious mind. Don't fight it. Don't beat it with a stick, but just relax it. And when the thoughts come, just blow them away like little smoke. No, not now. Now this is my time to relax, my time to rest. So I think consciously relaxing the body, relaxing the mind helps you. It's tension that feeds the restless mind. And play with that yourself.
I found a couple of things that are helpful. One is that, we've all learned in practicing Hong Sa that when you are aware that the mind has wandered, to bring it back. But Devi's very right. We shouldn't do that with any sense of tension. Just, I've forgotten. Okay, let me focus on Hong Sa. When you're not practicing Hong Sa, I found it very helpful that as soon as you catch the mind wandering a little bit, to bring it back either to seeing light in the forehead or listening to the sound of Om. Either one of those snaps you back into a state of concentration.
Okay, this has a pretty simple answer. It's a good question about meditation. And it's, while meditating, we focus on our spiritual eye and aim for the light. But we are also told to meditate on something. For example, if we need any clarity on questions or even wishes. Doesn't the second practice divert our focus from meditation? Or should we first meditate on these questions and wishes? Well, that's a good question, and it's helpful. Yes, true meditation is not asking for answers. It's not asking for fulfilled desires or even prayers for others. True meditation, as Master said, is concentration on God or one of His qualities. So if you have questions, if you have answers you're wanting, when you sit to meditate, give them to God. Think about them. I would like an answer to this problem, how to deal with this situation, and then forget about it. Then you do your practices, your techniques, and then focus at the spiritual eye. Try to just become one with the light or with peace or with joy. And that's where the intuitive answers to your questions come when you're calmly poised, centered in the light or in peace. So ask the questions, but then let them go. Master said, when you plant a seed, you don't keep digging it up to see if it's grown yet. Plant the seed of a question or an answer you'd like, and then just let yourself rest in God. And the answers will come, whether in that meditation or later in the day or in a few days, but they will come in a time when your mind is perhaps a little preoccupied elsewhere, and all of a sudden you get the answer to the question you wanted.
I'll use just an example that might help clarify. So sometimes we hear the phrase that if there's a problem, someone will say, well, let me sleep on that. Mm-hmm. So if there's a problem and you're going to sleep on it, is it more effective to lay awake worrying about the problem, or is it better to go to sleep? So is it better in meditation to keep asking the question and worrying about it, or is it better to meditate? Better to meditate, forget about the question. You can't sleep if you're constantly worried about the question. So let it go and let a deeper aspect of the mind work on that. And then at the end of meditation, as Devi said, often an intuitive solution will come. When you wake up in the morning, sometimes when you've slept on a question, you know what to do. And so you need to sleep when you sleep, you need to meditate when you meditate, and you need to worry only when you worry, and then toss that out.
Okay, so it's about 20 to 9. There are a few more questions. Should we go on? Or?
Maybe if there are questions that any of you have. Okay, Prasana.
Swamiji was, through his talks, through his books, his videos, we learned that he was completely and single-mindedly attuned with Master. So how do we gradually develop that kind of single-mindedness in our own lives?
Well, there's a phrase in the Bible that said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy soul, and with all thy strength." So if you take that and turn it toward the question of attunement with the Guru, so emotionally and devotionally try to express your love to him and to feel him with all thy mind. Try to read his writings, listen to his voice, tune in to his answers. The more you use your mind and attune it to him, the more his consciousness will begin to work through you. All your soul means to meditate and go to your higher, deeper qualities. And so one of the aspects of meditation is to try to feel the connection between your soul and Master or God, and to feel that. Or in the beginning of meditation or at the end, it's also helpful to visualize him and try to draw his consciousness. And all your strength means willpower. And so to serve Master, to serve the Guru, to attune your willpower to the will of God. Master said the highest prayer is, I will think, I will act, I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. And so in these ways you try to attune, and the more you practice it, the more you want to practice it, and the more effective your practice of it becomes.
Yeah. And we need to be patient, but also unrelenting. And so you say, inwardly think, my intention is to find God in this lifetime, but however long it takes, I won't give up. So there's a question on karma, which I think we answered already. Why do good people have to struggle in their lives? I think we did answer that it's the process of developing, overcoming karma, and finding and developing our own inner strength. And then this will be the last one. This is actually what it says. You have answered all our questions. But living in the right way is a challenge. Life seems so complex. Many times, the right thought and right action is not coming to me when dealing with people. How can I improve this? Well, I think we've answered it also, but just to kind of sum up our answers, I'll say, and then Jyotish can say, life is complex, but it's not impossible. It's not, Master said, every test is a test of our willpower. And he said, every test that comes to you, you have the strength and the insight to overcome it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will, but you have the power within you to overcome it. So don't be defeated by life. It will never, as Master said, I will never give up my job with you. And I will give you lots of my good karma. And so at the end of the day, at the end of the life, it really comes back to the grace of the Guru. And if we can, all the complexities, all the karma, up and down and good and bad, suffering and all of it, it just comes back to surrendering to the feet of the Guru. And then that moment comes when we just say, oh, what a beautiful show it was, God. You and I together walked through this life, this drama, this dream, and your joy was always with me. Your love was always with me. You were always with me. So at the end of it all, it just comes back to devotion and surrender to God through the Guru.
You know, your life is going to give you the experiences that you need. The real key is just to keep the mind positive and accepting that what comes is from God. There's a joke about a young man comes to an older man and he says to the older man, you have such good judgment. How do you get good judgment? And the older man says, well, my son, good judgment comes from experience. And the younger man says, well, how do you get experience? Bad judgment. And so you're going to make mistakes. Accept that as part of the process. You're going to forget God. Accept that as part of the process. So all of the things are just part of the same process. But if you keep the consciousness moving, always moving, with the deepest thought of the mind and the heart, I want to overcome all the things that are holding me back from knowing you. Help me with that. If you keep that, then God will use the sail of your willingness and of your desire to know Him. He will use that sail to blow with His winds of grace, to blow you across the seas of delusion. Okay.
Thank you for good questions.
Yeah, good questions.
We answered almost all of them, more or less. Okay, well, we'll see some of you tomorrow for the Kriya, and we'll see, I hope, all of you on Saturday for the program, if you can. And then we'll also have the Sunday satsang, which has been changed to noon.
So 12 to 2.
Yeah, on Sunday. And so thank you all.
In part also, we're changing that so that we have time after the satsang, because on Saturday night at the big program, there'll be a release of the new Touch of Joy book, and also the
Lessons in Discipleship.
Lessons in Discipleship in Tamil.
And then we can sign
Yeah,
the books.
so if you have a book that you want signed, we'll do that after the Sunday satsang.
Okay, and don't worry about the 60,000 lifetimes.
Yeah,
It's mainly done.
Hey,
Mainly
right.
behind you.
right.
Okay. God bless you.